Hello everybody! So this video is going to be an introduction to Ellen of the Ways. Sorry this video is slightly later than I had anticipated this week. I hurt my hand. Well, I say I hurt my hand. So I have like a trapped nerve in this hand, or it could be RSI or a mixture of the two. It's something that does happen to me sporadically. God, I feel so clueless. I hope not sporadically. Points if you understand that reference. It does happen every so often, and so me being able to do my makeup with one hand took me twice as long as normal, and it doesn't look too bad considering I did it all with my left hand, which is not my main hand. So there you go. Which is why I'm getting the sigils out very slowly, so I only written things are very slow. So yeah, hello. Ooh. And it's a bit awkward, so apologies for that. You may have already known that if you're on Discord, and if you're not, why not? So who is Ellen of the Ways, for the people who don't know? She's an elusive goddess described as shimmering and changeable, and is seen with antlers or hooves, known to rule the ways, the roads, and the passage of human life, best known for her appearance in the Mabinogion, which I always pronounce wrong. I'm trying really hard. The Dream of Macsen and Ellen. So I actually am going to read that from If Women Rose Rooted by Sharon Blackie, who is one of my favorite spiritual authors. And I'm going to take out my beautiful bookmark, which a gorgeous lady sent me. She knows who she is. I don't say who it is in case people don't want people to know. So, so she has a version in here, and we're going to read it together and go through the story. So this is the main story that exists of her. There aren't any other surviving in print versions, which I think is usually the case with, well, no, I know is usually the case with a lot of the Celtic gods, because their stories were oracular, they were lost, they were either written down or discarded by monks, changed, you know, the whole 9 yards. So let's just read this from If Women Rose Rooted. The handsome and vigorous man who came to be known in Britain as Macsen and Ellen was the emperor of Rome, where he was called Maximus. One day, at the end of a meeting he had called with the 32 kings whose countries were subject to Rome's rule, he suggested they might all go hunting together. So at daybreak they set off, Macsen and his kings. They rode through the crisp, cool air of the morning until they came to a green wooded valley through which ran the great river Tiber, and there they hunted until midday. By that time the sun was fierce and scorching, so Macsen decided to stop and rest. His attendants gathered themselves around him and rested their shields on a shaft of their spears to shade him from the sun, and they placed a gold enamel shield under his head, and so Macsen slept. Super comfy shields pillow, what everybody needs in the boiling hot sun, just saying. ... And in a fine stone castle on a misty island far, far to the west, a weaver of dream paths cocked her head to the east and cast out a thread, which I love that imagery. As Macsen slept, he dreamed. In this dream, he was riding further along on the valley they had hunted in, following the Tiber to its source. After some time, he came to a mountain so high it seemed to touch the sky. Man, deep, mountain high, ha, 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 ha. You're welcome. When he crossed over and reached the other side, he looked down onto the most beautiful land he had ever seen. Several mighty rivers flowed down the mountain and out to sea, and Macsen travelled along the banks to the largest of them, because, you know, men. Finally, he came to a city by the coast, and in the centre of the city there was a vast and beautiful castle with high towers of many different colours, and he saw a great fleet of ships. Sheep are slightly different, but I bet he did see sheeps. I bet he did. They're slightly less impressive than the ships, though. One of the ships was larger and fairer than all the others, half made of gold, half made of silver, and a bridge made of whalebone arced across the water from the ship to the land. Macsen mounted from his horse and walked across the bridge and into the ship. As he stepped on board, the sail was hoisted and they began to sail across the ocean. Onward they sailed, and eventually the ship came to rest on the shore of the fairest isle in the whole world. I mean, in his dream, Macsen travelled along the length and breadth. I smushed the words together. It's too warm today. Sorry, guys. The length of the country from sea to sea. He saw beautiful green valleys, green woods, towering mountains, and rocky precipices. He had never seen an island so rich, so diverse in its landscapes. And then finally, approaching the rugged far western shore of this breathtaking land, he saw another island a little way out to sea. Between him and this smaller island stretched vast green plains, surrounded by high mountains, and from the highest mountain of all, a great river flowed through the land and spilled into the sea. At the mouth of the river stood a castle, the finest that Macsen had ever seen, and the door of that castle was open, so he went in, because of course he did. Macsen found himself in a magnificent hall. Its roof was made of silver, its walls of glittering precious gems, and the double doors were made of gold. Golden seats and silver tables filled the hall, and in the centre of it 2 red-haired youths were playing a game that looked like chess. The game board was made of silver, and the pieces were made of gold. The youths were clothed in jet black satin, bands of red gold, encrusted with sparkling rubies and other 5 gems, which bound up their hair. They had shoes of fine new leather, fastened by buttons, which were also made of gold. Super fancy. Besides a pillar at the far end of the hall was a grey-haired, clear-browed man. What does non-cleared brow mean? What does a clear-browed mean? Does this mean he had no eyebrows? What is happening? Sitting in a chair of ivory with 2 golden eagles carved into its back, the man who gave the impression of immense power had gold bracelets on his arms, many rings on his hands, and a golden torque around his neck. His hair was held back from his face with a golden diadem. The game board was laid out on a low table before him, and he held a rod of gold in one hand and a steel file in the other. Macsen saw he was carving out pieces which looked like chessmen for the board. Next to him was a young woman sitting in a chair of red gold. She was beautiful, so blindingly beautiful. She shone brighter than the midday sun that Macsen could hardly bear to look at her. And yet there is a description, so guess he didn't try not to all that hard. She wore a gown of white silk with gold clasps, of course, at her breast, and an overdress of gold cloth. There's a whole lot of gold. That's what we're learning about this. Gold! The gold figure's circlet on her head was studded with rubies and gems and pearls, and a girdle of guess what gold was wrapped around her small waist. In Macsen's dream, the woman rose from her seat. He walked towards her and took her in her arms, and they sat down together on her great chair of, guess what, gold. But just as he was turning to face her, into his dream crept the sound of dogs chafing at leashes, the sound of shields falling against each other, and the beating together of spear shafts as the canopy constructed by his attendants collapsed, and the neighing of horses and the sounds of men roused themselves from sleep. And so the emperor awoke, but all he could think of was the beautiful woman in his dream and the great love that he had felt for her. And so, with the saddest face and heaviest heart in the world, he returned with his hunting party to Rome. For a full week, Macsen languished in his rooms. He didn't go out or eat or drink. That's not true. He'd be dead. No song or tale could interest him, and he wouldn't be persuaded to do anything but sleep, for it was only in his dreams that he thought he might see her again. One day, Macsen's senior advisor told him that all the members of his court, indeed all the people of Rome, were whispering against him. Why are they doing this? Macsen asked his advisor. Because no one can get a word to you or an answer to a question or judgment on a matter of importance, and they say you are no longer a true lord. After 1 week of moping, he's no longer a true lord. Fickle, these people. Fickle. Maskin said, "Bring me the wisest men of Rome, and I will tell them why I am sorrowful and ask their advice." The wise men of Rome were brought before the emperor. "In a dream I saw a woman," he said to them, "and for lack of her there is neither life nor spirit in me." Maskin told them the full story of his dream, and at the end, the three wise men answered, "Go find a barn." No. "Lord, this is our counsel, so that you send messages to the three directions of the world to search for the woman of your dreams, and then surely they may be found, and in the hope of good news will comfort you in the months ahead." So Maskin sent out messengers. Oh, how can he not figure this out himself if he's the emperor of Rome? And they just throughout the world for a year, seeking information about the land he had sailed to in his dream and the woman he had seen in the castle. But when the messengers came back to Rome, they knew no more than they had known when they set out. Bumpkus in a year. Bumpkus in a year. You need some new servants. Goodness. Maskin was filled with sorrow, and a great wave of hopelessness descended upon him. Then his senior advisor spoke again. "Lord," he said, "let us go out to hunt exactly the same way when you had the dream, and we'll see if we can trace the path that was laid out before you." So the emperor went out as if to hunt, and came again to the green wooded valley of the great river Tiber. "This is the place," he remembered. And then the details of his dream came back to him. "This is where I was sleeping, and in my dreams I followed the river westward to its source. This is where it begins, the path that was laid out for me in my dream." And so 13 messengers came to the place at Maskin's command. They came to a high mountain, and on other sides the vast plains and large rivers flowing through them. "Look," they exclaimed, "this must be the land the emperor saw." And as Maskin had instructed them, they travelled the length of the greatest rivers until they came to the mouth of the sea, and there was a vast city with the many high-coloured towers of the castle. The largest fleet in the world floated there in the harbour, and one ship was larger and fairer than any of the others. And again they exclaimed, "Look, this is the place the emperor dreamed about." Took a whole year to do this, but hey, they came to birth on the great ship across the sea, and so it was they came to the Isle of Britain. And they travelled across the island until they came to the high mountain of Snowdon, and they travelled on until they arrived in the territory of Arvon, and saw the Isle of Anglesey out before them. "Look," they said, "here is the island the emperor saw in his sleep." They went to their way to Abersain and to a great castle at the mouth of the river. The door of the castle was open. They went in and marvelled at the rich hall. Inside were two young men playing a game which looked like chess, a grey-haired man in an ivory chair, and a beautiful young woman beside him in the chair of gold. The messengers knelt and greeted the woman, hailing her as the Empress of Rome. She frowned at them and said, "Why, you look and behave as if you are honourable men, so why do you mock me?" The messengers assured her this was no mockery. "The Emperor of Rome has seen you in a dream, and now he has fallen in love with you and cannot live without you. So tell us, will you go to Rome and be made empress?" Can you imagine this situation if this really happened? I mean, you'd be like, well, on the one hand, this guy sounds Fruit Loops, but on the other hand, he does rule over the largest the largest empire in the known world. Is he handsome? And the young woman laughed at the messengers and said, "If it is true the Emperor of Rome loves me, let him come here himself to find me." See, girl knows what's up. She's like, "I'm not marrying him if I can't stand the sight of him." He can come here. But I do like that little bit of sovereignty, a little bit of spirit there. So the messengers hurried back to Rome and told Maskin what they had seen. "We will be your guides, Lord," they said to him, "over land and sea, to the place where the woman you love lives. We know her name, her kindred, and her race." So Maskin set off at once with his army at his back, because you need an army to go find a woman, apparently. They landed in the Isle of Britain, and Maskin conquered it. Wait, what? Taking from Bele the son of Mabinogion and his sons, all of whom he drove back to the sea. That's one way of saying he killed a whole load of people on the way. After his conquest, he rode on to Arvon and Abersain, and then he recognized the castle from his dream. He hurried through its wide open door and strode into the magnificent hall, and there at its center he saw Kainan and Adian, the sons of Udoy, playing at... I don't know how to pronounce this Welsh word. I'm going to guess a gwydbl. Gwydbril, the ancient game of destiny and divination, and he saw Udore himself, the son of Caradwach, sitting on a chair of ivory, carving out men for his own golden game board. And there beside Udore, sitting on a chair of gold, was his daughter, the maiden Macsen had seen in his dream. He knew now that her name was Ellen. Macsen knelt before Ellen and said, "Empress of Rome, all hail," and that night she became his bride. The next morning, as was customary, Ellen asked Macsen for a wedding gift. He told her to name whatever she wanted and he would see it done. So Ellen asked to have the island of Britain for her father. I mean, perks, I guess. All the land from the Channel to the Irish Sea. She asked for the 3 adjacent islands for herself to hold under the title of Empress of Rome, and she asked finally that 3 great castles should be made for her in whatever places she might choose in the Isle of Britain. To all of this, Macsen agreed. Ellen chose to have the greatest of her 3 castles built at Arvon, and Macsen stayed there with her. So that he would not be homesick, earth from Rome was brought into the site of the new castle. Very Dracula, just saying. After that, the 2 castles were built for her at Carlion, and Carmarthen. When the castles were finished, Ellen looked around her and declared that she would build great roads which connected one castle to the other, which crossed the great Isle of Britain. So Ellen it was who caused the great roads of the land to be built, and her army watched over her roads and used them to travel up and down the country to keep it safe. That is why they are called Sarnu Ellen, the causeways of Ellen. For Ellen was a native of this land, and the men of Britain would not have built such great roads for anyone other than her. Few notes that actually follow this, which are points of interest in the book itself. The idea is not actually as unlikely as it seems. In his groundbreaking book, The Ancient Path, historian Graham Robb argues convincingly that many of the roads attributed to the Romans were actually founded on old Celtic tracks, which formed a great network across Europe. These long straight roads were created after exacting surveys and precise geometric analyses because the Celtic people were surprisingly sophisticated astronomers and engineers. Okay. A few notes on the character of Ellen too. There are equivalents in other Celtic countries. In Brittany, there is the giant Ehes, the old goddess of the Osmices, the Gaulish tribes who occupied the land before the arrival of British settlers, who is credited with the creation of causeways. Ellen, like many other female characters in the Mabinogion, I can never pronounce it, is representative of sovereignty. Macsen's dream is reminiscent of an Eiling, the Irish word for a mystic vision in which Spearfin, literally a sky woman or woman of the other worlds, who personifies the country of Ireland itself, appears to a hero. This is in the Welsh rather than the Irish, though. There are 2 main features of an Eiling. It offers a beautiful vision of an otherworldly woman who the dreamer longs for, and it inspires the dreamer to set off on a quest and win the woman that he saw in his dream. Only Ellen, as the representative of sovereignty, can bestow the kingship on Macsen, and so the marriage between the 2 represents the ancient sacred marriage between king and land. The old story is very clear that it was Ellen who caused the roads to be built, not Macsen. The story firmly states the men of Britain would not have allowed the roads to be built for him, but built them for Ellen because she was native to the land. Ta-da! Is there anything else that I wanted to mention from this book? Not particularly. Okay. So this is the main story of Ellen and Ellen of the Ways, and is why she's known as Ellen of the Ways. There is some reference to her as Helen and Helen of the Roads, which is suggested like it might be an alteration of her name. Ow, don't move your hand. If you're going to talk with your left hand. Okay, I'm going to put the book down and talk with the left hand. Hello. And so there is very little else written about her, and what else seems to come from personal experiences and people's analyses of the story, the Mabinogion story, as well as what sort of gets handed down by the spoken word and sort of folklore and things of that nature. There was a really interesting note that I made long before the Romans arrived. Ellen was the guardian of the ley, the ancient trackways. In her guise as horned goddess, she led the way on the migratory tracks of the reindeer, the only species of deer in which the females have antlers. Later, after all the reindeer migrated further north and out of Britain, Ellen opened the pathways of the red deer, followed into the ancient forests of northern Europe. Ellen reveals the lost ways of shamanism in Britain. Reindeer became extinct, by the way, in the UK about 800 years ago. Although it was interesting to note that the first baby reindeer was born in the UK in 2010, whose parents were imported from Scandinavia. So they're coming back, the reindeer, which is nice. And so it was an interesting point for that, because it made me feel like she might have had a hand in that. She might have had a hand in, like, it's been 800 years, we need some reindeer back in this country. And I'm like, I could feel that. I could feel that, Ellen. I could feel it. So there are other interpretations of reindeer goddesses, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that in some of the podcasts that we're going to do. I just kind of wanted to read to you guys this story and introduce her energy to you in the story that we do have. And that kind of idea of sovereignty, of marrying to the land, her kind of like a little bit of a I don't know what that means. My brain went, what does that wiggle mean, Joey? A little bit of character, a little bit of strength, a little bit of sass in refusing to go to the king. He had to come to her land if he was to be made a part of it, which is nice. You know, no bowing down to men in her. Well, she's meant to be a goddess, so in her energies. And the dreaming, the isling, the sending the tendril, sending the thread out into the world and connecting all of the things through pathways, through roads, the neural network of the brain, download into the subconscious through dreaming. It's very, like that little note there said, very shamanistic, and highlights the relationship between all living things. The energy that I have received from her is very much about the interconnectedness of all things through the spiritual ecosystem. And if you are on the $25 tier already, you'll see that the spell has already actually gone up for this video, which was not what I intended, but hey, and that is to do with connecting yourself down into the spiritual ecosystem, realizing that you are one with the world around you, and through all things are roads or pathways, the connective threads that we walk, and whether we walk with our feet or our soul feet, whether we dream them into being, whether we dream and walk through these realms, whether we visualize them and manifest them and visualize them through, again, the subconscious, the psyche into being, and the way the neural net creates new pathways of thought, and the way memories are held in these intricate places in our minds, which are all, you know, neural pathways. So the idea of pathways crosses over with many different areas of our life, and I think that is something to really explore a little bit more in depth with the podcasts, which are coming up very soon. And so I just wanted to do a video here just to introduce you to the idea of Ellen. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There's much more to come, if not a little bit slowly, because I am one-legged. I'm sure there is some there's something in that. But there you go. I am a one-hoofed Joey. Many blessings, guys, and talk to you very soon.